My name is Alice Reynolds. I'm 33, living in Frankfurt, Germany, working at a global investment firm where time is money and every decision carves itself into someone's balance sheet. It's a high-stakes grind, but for me, it's more than just a career. It's an escape, a sanctuary from the tight-laced expectations of home, where I was always someone's daughter, someone's sister, but never truly myself. I'm originally from Austin, Texas. That's where I left behind my parents and Megan, my younger sister. She's 9 years my junior, which made us strangers even under the same roof. While I was clawing through scholarship essays and part-time jobs, she was smearing paint on walls and playing dress-up in the backyard. By the time she had her first boyfriend, I was paying rent and filing taxes. We were always out of sync, living in parallel but separate timelines. Our lives only overlapped during the expected rituals, Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays. I'd send her a quick happy birthday message sometimes with a sunflower emoji she liked. That was the full extent of our sisterhood. 3 years out of college, once I finally had financial footing, I decided to stop throwing money into rent. That's when my mother mentioned the apartment, my grandmother's old place. She brought it up one night over dinner, almost casually. "We're still renting your grandma's apartment," she said, sipping wine. "But if you're interested, we can sell it to you. Good price." It was near downtown, quiet, sunlit. I remembered the scent of lavender drifting through the hallways and the almond cookies my grandmother and I used to bake every Sunday afternoon. When she said $85,000, I didn't even blink. I used my savings and made it mine. The paperwork was notarized. The title was transferred. For the first time, I had a home that was truly mine. I lived there for 3 years, replaced the floors, painted the kitchen, filled the balcony with plants. Every time I unlocked the door, the world's noise dimmed. That apartment didn't just shelter me, it held me. Then came the job offer from Europe, the one you don't say no to. I packed everything, locked the door, and handed the keys to a property agency for long-term rental. I never let go. Not emotionally. It stayed like a pressed flower in the pages of my life, preserved waiting. Since arriving in Germany, my contact with home has thinned out. My mother sends the occasional email. My father drops the odd comment on my photos. Megan vanished completely from my radar. I assumed she was living her life, college parties, that whirlwind of becoming that I'd been through a decade earlier. I didn't mind. In fact, I felt a quiet relief. No more awkward dinners. No more, "When are you coming home?" or "Why don't you settle down nearby?" But peace, I've learned, is fragile. It was a Wednesday afternoon, deep in quarterly financial reports, when my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in over a year. Megan. I stared at the screen, heart pausing. Something shifted like the first crack in a frozen lake. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hey, you finally picked up. Hope I'm not interrupting anything," she said brightly, as if we spoke every week. "Not at all," I replied, leaning back, voice carefully neutral. "What's going on?" "I just got into UT Austin. I'll be starting this fall. Mom and Dad said I should call you because..." She hesitated. "Because I'll be moving into your apartment." I froze. "I'm sorry, what?" "You know the apartment downtown, the one you lived in before Germany. It's super close to campus. Mom and Dad said it's perfect for me to move in. That way, I won't have to worry about rent." My fingers tightened around the phone. "Megan, that apartment is mine, not Mom and Dad's." She laughed soft and unbothered, like I'd just said something silly. "Well, I thought Grandma left it to them. You lived there, then moved away. Now it's my turn. No big deal." I closed my eyes, trying not to let my voice fracture. I didn't just live there. I bought that apartment for $85,000. From Mom and Dad. The sale was notarized. It's legally mine. There was silence on the other end, then a hesitant chuckle. "Are you serious?" "They told me it's still under their name. And I mean, you're abroad. It's just sitting empty." "I really need a place, Alice. I'm not asking for anything crazy." I exhaled, slow, and sharp. First of all, it's not empty. It's under a 12-month lease. Second, even if it wasn't, you can't just move in without asking me. That's not how any of this works. Her tone dropped quiet, unsure. So, you're really saying no? I closed my eyes again, letting the weight settle. It's not about saying no. It's about the fact that you, Mom and Dad, don't have the right to make that decision for me. I don't want you moving into that apartment, but they already said yes. Her voice cracked with disbelief, like I had just broken a silent contract she assumed we both understood. I already started planning. I bought a desk, a rug, even those stupid string lights. I cut in. Sharper than intended. I don't know what they told you, Megan, but they can't promise you something that doesn't belong to them. The silence on the other end felt like standing in a room with no windows. Then a breath. Sharp, and a tone I hadn't heard from her since we were kids, defiant cutting. You make good money, Alice. It's just an apartment. You don't need to cling to it like this. You can rent another one if you ever come back. But for me, this could change everything. I don't have options like you do. That landed like a slap, not guilt, not even pain. Just disbelief. The kind that leaves a ringing in your ear. So, because I've worked, because I've built something for myself, I'm supposed to give it up the moment someone else wants it. That's not what I meant, she muttered. But I'm your sister, and I'm the one who paid $85,000 for that apartment, I said, cold and clear. This conversation is over. Megan, I'm sorry. But the answer is no. I ended the call before her silence could reshape itself into persuasion. My hand trembled as I set the phone down on the table. The tremor didn't stop. It stayed with me all evening, like static under my skin. I stared at spreadsheets, but the numbers bled into each other, shapeless and irrelevant. Something had shifted, and I knew it wasn't going away. The next morning, after a client meeting in Zurich, as I stepped out into the wind, my phone buzzed. One name, one pressure point I'd been dreading, Mom. I answered under the awning of a quiet cafe. The wind whipped through the street, slicing past my coat collar. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had weight. The kind that flattens you without shouting. Can you explain what exactly is going on? I had been rehearsing this in my head since last night. Yet I still felt my throat tighten. What's going on, I said steady, is that you and Megan made a decision about my property without talking to me. That's not a family favor. That's overstepping. That's not just some apartment, she snapped. It's where our family lived. Where you stayed rent-free for 3 years. Now your sister needs it and you say no. Don't you think you're being a little selfish, Alice? I tilted my face to the overcast sky. Thick, unmoving clouds above me. I spoke slowly, measured. Mom, I didn't stay there rent-free. I bought that apartment from you and Dad for $85,000. I have the deed, the receipts, the contract, all in my name. A pause. Not surprise, just recalculating. Then she said, yes, you technically bought it, but it's still family property. And when a younger sibling needs help, an older sister steps up. There it was, the pivot from memory to obligation. You have a good job, a strong career. You're living in Germany. You don't need to hold on to that place anymore. So, because I've built something stable, I lose my right to own what I've paid for. She sighed. Don't make this more complicated than it is. This is just a family matter. Can't you let Megan borrow the apartment for a year? Are you really going to be this petty? Something stirred in me. Not rage. Something colder. Older. The thing you feel when love is used as leverage. You're calling it borrowing, I said. And what if she moves in and never leaves? Will you back me then, Or will you tell me it's not worth fighting over because she's your sister? Don't exaggerate, she cut in. Megan's a good girl. She wouldn't do that. But if you keep being this harsh, you're going to hurt her. I pressed my lips together. I'm your daughter, too. Or did you forget that? Did you even stop to think how I'd feel? You made plans without telling me. You expected me to accept them like it was perfectly reasonable. That's not a conversation. That's an ambush. Her voice rose, finally breaking the calm. We've put everything into Megan's college tuition. We can't afford rent on top of that. The apartment is the only reasonable solution. I almost laughed. And if it didn't exist? I asked quietly. Would you have told her to sleep in a park? Or were you just counting on the fact that I'd stay silent? She didn't respond. If you think it's the only option, then rent it from me. I'll draft a lease. I'll give a discount. And you can pay like anyone else. The line went still. I could hear her breathing. I can't believe you'd even suggest that, she said, her voice sharp. Do you really want to charge rent to your own sister? No, Mom, I said, every word deliberate. I don't want to charge Megan anything. But I also won't be taken advantage of just because I have something you think I can afford to lose. If you don't want to pay, I said, my voice firm, then Megan doesn't get to live there. I don't owe anyone that apartment. There was a pause, long, hollow. Then her voice, stripped of warmth, cut through the silence. If you're going to be this stubborn, then fine. Do whatever you want. But don't be surprised when no one in this family wants to speak to you anymore. And then she hung up. I didn't move. Not at first. I stood frozen among the blur of pedestrians, the phone still pressed to my ear long after the line went dead. But something in me had already snapped, not because she was angry, but because for the first time I understood the unspoken truth. I was no longer the good daughter. Not since the moment I refused to surrender what I had earned. That night, sleep didn't come. My flat in Frankfurt, once a sanctuary, suddenly felt too small, like the walls were inching closer, tightening around the space I'd carved for myself. The furniture hadn't moved, but something else had shifted. The words from Megan, from Mom, looped in my mind like a faulty recording, accusations dressed as concern manipulation, disguised as love. At 3:00 a.m., I sat in the kitchen, a mug of cold tea cupped between my palms. The city outside was pitch black silent, but inside me was a storm that wouldn't relent. And then through the haze, one name surfaced, Aunt Sarah. My mother's youngest sister, quiet, steady, the kind of person who saw through the fog when others pretended it wasn't there. Back in high school, she'd mailed me SAT prep books with a note that read, "Because I doubt your mother will remember in time." I picked up my phone, hesitated, then tapped FaceTime. She answered within seconds, her hair tied back, no makeup, eyes sharp as ever. She didn't need words to cut through illusion. She always saw things as they were. "Well, Alice Reynolds," she said, arching an eyebrow. "A midnight call? This must be big." I gave a weary smile. "Do you remember Grandma's apartment in Austin? Of course. You bought it from your parents, right? I even helped check the paperwork." I nodded. "Yeah, and now Megan wants to move in, because Mom and Dad told her it still belongs to them." Her face darkened. I told her everything. Megan's assumption, the confrontation, Mom's ultimatum. I left nothing out, and she said nothing until I finished. When I did, she exhaled long and tired. "Your mom hasn't changed," she said quietly. "She's always believed it's your job to sacrifice for Megan." I've watched this pattern play out for years, but this is different. Turning your own property into an emotional weapon. That's not just unfair. It's manipulative. I felt something loosen inside me. Not vindication, just the quiet relief of not being gaslit. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I don't know. My eyes drifted to the dark window. I don't want to hate Megan. I'm angry because she didn't ask. She didn't think. She just assumed it was hers. I don't know if it was her choice or if she's just parroting what Mom told her. Sarah nodded slowly. Then there's one thing you should try. I looked up. Video call Megan, she said, face to face. Don't text, don't call. Look her in the eye and let her see you. Sometimes people don't realize how much they're hurting you until they have to look into your face while they're doing it. I didn't respond. The silence held space for what I wasn't ready to admit. She softened. Maybe Megan's not the villain here. Maybe she's just repeating a story they told her. Don't let your parents wedge something between you two that might take years to undo. I nodded slowly. Inside me, something shifted. A strange blend of fear and resolve began to rise, like stepping onto a frozen lake and realizing it may or may not hold your weight, but you step anyway. You're right, I said. I'll call her. Sarah smiled faintly. I knew you would. After the call ended, I stayed seated. The weight hadn't vanished, but it had redistributed. The anger, the sadness, the helpless ache that comes from being told your boundaries are optional. But beneath all that, there was still hope, because Megan was still my sister. And if there was a chance, however slim, that she didn't know what she was doing, then I had to give her the opportunity to see it. Before it was too late, I opened my laptop. My fingers hovered, then moved with purpose. The screen lit up. I tapped her name. Connect. The screen flickered, and then Megan's face appeared. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her hair was loosely tied with a faded cloth band, and she wore the old navy hoodie I gave her for Christmas 3 years ago. It still had a worn patch on the left sleeve. Megan looked tired, like she hadn't slept, but she forced a smile anyway, the kind that tries too hard not to show the cracks underneath. You're calling back, she asked, her voice hesitant, almost fragile. I thought after yesterday, we were done. I exhaled, straightened my posture. We need to talk, like two adults. She gave a small nod. So, what now? I'm guessing you're still not okay with me staying at the apartment, right? I looked her in the eyes, through the screen, but fully present. No, Megan, I'm not okay with it. But this isn't just about the apartment. You need to understand why. Not just what Mom and Dad told you. She frowned, almost defensive. I heard it directly from them. They said the apartment still belongs to them. I didn't just invent that. I know, I said quietly. I reached for the second laptop on the table, opening the PDF file I'd prepared. But this is the truth. I shared my screen. The title read, Property Transfer Agreement, Alice Reynolds. Beneath it were 3 signatures, Mom's, Dad's, and mine, dated and notarized under the official seal of the Travis County Clerk's Office. Megan leaned in. Her eyes scanned the page, slowly, lips parted slightly, not breathing. Nearly 2 full minutes passed before she whispered, This is real. They sold it to you. Her voice cracked. But they never said anything. They told me you just lived there for a while. I nodded, voice steady. I bought that apartment with my savings, $85,000. Not a loan, not a gift, every cent I earned. She didn't answer. Her eyes stayed fixed on the screen as though trying to reassemble a broken jigsaw puzzle with missing edges. When she finally looked back at me, something in her expression had shifted. Not anger, but a quiet confusion trying to anchor itself in a new reality. I don't blame you, I said, softer now. Not for believing them, but I can't keep staying silent when the truth is being bent out of shape. I've already stayed silent for too long. Megan lowered her head, her voice barely audible. I'm sorry. I swear I didn't know. I really thought they were telling me the truth. I paused. What else did they say? She hesitated, then lifted her gaze. They said, they used all the money from the apartment sale to pay for my college tuition. That there was nothing left. That I should be grateful and work hard because they'd sacrificed everything for me. I leaned back, my hands trembling slightly. You're on a full scholarship. You know that, don't you? Her smile was bitter. I know. I remember the day I got the letter. I ran to show Mom. She looked up and said, Good. That takes some pressure off us. My throat tightened. So, they never paid your tuition. She shook her head slowly. Not once. Not for tuition. Not for textbooks. Even my dorm was covered. I've been working at the campus library to buy groceries. To survive. Silence fell between us like heavy snowfall. Then Megan spoke again, quieter this time. Do you remember when I begged to join that summer art program in 9th grade, I asked? But Mom said no, because they'd already spent too much sending you to college out of state. I stared at her. I applied on my own, I said. I won scholarships. I worked 3 part-time jobs that summer just to cover my plane ticket and books. They didn't pay a dime. Megan blinked like she'd been struck. I always thought, you were their favorite. You got to leave. You had the apartment. You were the one they always chose. I used to think the same thing about you, I said. Every time I asked for help, Mom would say, we're saving that for Megan. We stared at each other through the glass of the Call sisters who had lived in the same story, but never the same chapter. Turns out, I said quietly, we were both being lied to. Another long pause followed. But this one wasn't heavy. It was hollow, like a curtain falling on a scene we both thought was real. I don't understand, Megan whispered. Why would they do that? I met her eyes. I don't know. But it's clear now they built a story that made us compete with each other. Quietly. Constantly. And we never even knew we were being played. Megan stared at me through the screen. Her eyes were unfocused, like someone surfacing after being submerged for too long, still unsure which way was up. I lowered the lid of my laptop halfway, just enough to breathe. My voice came quiet, controlled. Do you remember when you wanted to go to that environmental summer camp? Her eyes flickered. The one in Colorado? Yeah. I remember. I cried the whole week because all my friends went. I was the only one who stayed home. I nodded slowly. Mom told you she couldn't afford it because of my senior year tuition, didn't she? Yeah. I never got $1 from them that year. I was working in the campus library, 7 in the morning until 11 at night some weeks. Living on instant noodles. She said she paid for me. That was a lie. Megan let out a dry, bitter laugh that didn't quite land. Then what about the laptop you got for college? She used that as an excuse to say no when I asked for art classes. I leaned forward, voice firm. That laptop was second-hand, $600. I bought it from a senior who was graduating. Delivered pizzas all summer to afford it. Megan bit her lip. Her shoulders tensed as if bracing for another blow. Oh my God. I paused, breathing evenly. Did she ever say no to you? Because of me? Megan didn't hesitate. Too many times. Piano lessons in 6th grade, she said we couldn't afford it because you were studying out of state. 9th grade, I asked to go to the state science fair. She said no again because she just sent money to cover your books. I leaned back slowly. Everything tilted like the floor had shifted beneath me. I never asked her for books, I said. I borrowed from the library, bought used ones, photocopied entire chapters from a print shop near campus that charged by the page. Megan clenched her fists. How long have they been lying to us? I didn't answer. I couldn't. We stared at each other, but it felt like we were both staring through time, each pulling loose the stitched fabric of memories we had always trusted. Suddenly, another thread emerged. Your junior year, I asked, didn't you want new running shoes for track? She blinked. Yeah, I did. She told me she couldn't buy them because she'd just paid for your car repairs. I let out a hollow laugh. I've never owned a car in my life. I took the bus every single day. Silence. Not sulking, not stubbornness, but that still cold quiet you fall into when a foundation you built your entire identity on starts to rot from the inside. I always thought you were the favorite, Megan whispered. That you were the reason I kept getting no's. I used to resent you, Alice. I met her gaze, softened it. I used to think the exact same thing about you. We both smiled, not the kind that came from resolution, but from release. The bitter relief of realizing the enemy was never each other. Megan tilted her head. Why do you think they did it? I took a moment. Let the silence do what it needed to do. Maybe it gave them control, I finally said. As long as we stayed jealous, competing, we never questioned them. We never turned around and asked why things never added up. She nodded slowly. Her eyes were red, but clear. And we fell for it, for too long. Something broke loose inside me, a pressure that had lived in my chest for years, maybe decades. We hadn't solved everything, but this was the first step out. I looked straight at her. From now on, we talk directly. No more middlemen. No one speaks for us. She held my gaze. I promise. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. My sleep had been fragmented, restless, but it wasn't fatigue that pushed me out of bed. It was a thought that wouldn't leave me alone. What else haven't Megan and I been told? As soon as the clock hit 7:00 a.m. in Seattle, I called Aunt Sarah. She answered after 2 rings. Her hair was still messy, her voice rough from sleep. But the moment she saw my face, her expression softened. Hey, sweetheart, she said gently. What's going on? I didn't dance around it. Megan and I talked last night, I said quietly. And we started realizing a lot of things don't add up. The stories Mom and Dad told us. About money, about school, about sacrifice. Something's off. Aunt Sarah didn't respond right away. Her eyes narrowed, not in judgment, but in a way that told me she had been waiting for this conversation to happen for years. Then she asked gently, Did the 2 of you talk about the money your grandmother left behind? My breath caught. I lifted my head, heart thudding against my ribs. What money? She stared at me like she was trying to decide whether this was the moment to pull the last pin. Then she exhaled. Before she passed, your grandmother left behind $400,000. Split evenly, $200,000 for your college education and $200,000 for Megan's. It was stated clearly in her will, for that purpose only. I went still. The words didn't make sense at first. They just sat in the room like a stranger. No one ever told me that. Aunt Sarah nodded. They never intended to. She kept her voice even, but there was sorrow in it. Old sorrow, the kind that settles deep in the bones. Your mother was named custodian of the funds under oversight from the family attorney. But after your grandmother died, they pulled every cent out of the trust. I could barely speak. How, I don't know the exact details, but I know this: the attorney quit not long after. Quietly. No fight. Just gone. She disappeared from the screen for a few moments, then returned, holding an old folder weathered at the edges. Her voice dropped. I probably shouldn't still have this, but something told me to take pictures before it all vanished. She flipped through papers until she stopped at one with the familiar blue Wells Fargo seal. This is from the first year after Grandma died, she explained. Within 6 months, there were major withdrawals: a new car, a trip to Italy, charges from luxury restaurants in Austin, Dallas, Las Vegas, all directly from the account that was supposed to send you to college. My mouth went dry, but I asked anyway. Did you know Grandma used to send them money every month while we were growing up? She nodded. $2,000 a month. Since you were both small, she didn't want you girls to go without. But every time she asked, your mom would say, "The kids are fine. They don't need much." The flashbacks came like stabs. The off-brand cereal, hand-me-down sweaters, the library books I had to photocopy, the rejection letters that weren't from schools, but from my own parents disguised as budgeting decisions. Aunt Sarah's voice trembled slightly. I wanted to speak up, but your mother threatened me. She said if I interfered, she'd convince Grandma I was trying to get part of the inheritance. I was afraid of losing her trust. I looked straight at her, voice thin. The vacations, the bags, the cruises. She nodded again, slowly. They lived off that money, while you and Megan were scraping by. They used your futures as fuel for their comforts. It felt like my entire childhood had been rewritten. They weren't self-sacrificing parents doing their best. They were performers, playing saints on the surface. But Megan and I were the last to realize the curtain had already fallen. I looked down, then back up. Do you think Megan should know? She didn't hesitate. She needs to. 2 days later, I booked a flight to Austin. Megan met me at the airport in a borrowed car that shuddered when it braked. She didn't speak much. Neither did I. Most of what needed to be said had been unpacked in low light the night before. The rest, well, that was for today. We pulled up to the old 2-story house we grew up in. Gray shingles, tidy lawn, and a shiny new SUV parked in the driveway. The contrast was insulting. Megan gripped the wheel until her knuckles turned white. You okay? I asked softly. She nodded, but her eyes betrayed the strain. Let's just go in. The sooner the better. We rang the bell. Mom opened the door. For a second, something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe guilt, but she masked it quickly, stepping back like nothing was wrong. Oh, Alice, Megan, why didn't you call first? We're not here for dinner, Mom, I said evenly. We're here to talk. She hesitated, then stepped aside. Then come in, huh? Dad was seated on the living room couch, scrolling through his tablet like the world couldn't bother him. When he saw us, he raised one eyebrow and said flatly, Well, it's been a while since both of you came home together. His voice was casual, dismissive. He hadn't looked up long enough to see the storm coming through the front door. Megan said nothing as we entered. I walked ahead, dropped my bag by the armchair, and sat across from them, the same seats we once used for birthdays and quiet Sunday evenings. But today, everything was different. The room still held its symmetry, but the illusion had cracked. I looked directly at my mother. We'll get straight to the point, I said, voice even. We know about the money Grandma sent every month. We know about the inheritance she left meant solely for our education. The air changed. The temperature of the room dropped without warning. Dad lowered his tablet, glanced at Mom, then turned his eyes on me. Mom's voice was calm, too calm. Aunt Sarah told you, I nodded once. Megan's voice joined mine, quiet but clear. And I saw the statements, every transaction, the hotels, the restaurants, the vacations you said you could never afford. For a second, I thought I saw something flicker behind Mom's eyes. But then she leaned back and folded her arms. So what, she said. I froze. So what, Dad echoed with a hollow laugh. We were your parents. We had every right to use that money how we saw fit. We fed you, clothed, you gave you a roof. Isn't that enough? Megan's hands curled into fists. That money was meant for us. Grandma made it clear. Why did you take it, then pretend you had nothing? Mom waved her hand dismissively. What your grandmother wanted was her business. Once the money was in our hands, it became ours. What are you going to do? Sue us. What stunned me wasn't the threat. It was how easily they said it, as if love, as if blood, held no weight, once held up against their need for control. I stared at them, at the people who once kissed my forehead when I had nightmares, who cheered when I got into college. And now they sat in front of me, confessing to theft like it was a clerical error. No shame. No hesitation. I've always tried to understand, I said slowly. I used to believe you were struggling, that I had to sacrifice, be strong, be the one who didn't ask for help. But the truth is, you weren't struggling. You were withholding. You chose not to give. Dad narrowed his eyes. What do you want, Alice? A teary apology. Don't be naive. I stood. No, I want clarity. I turned to Megan, then back to them. Starting today, we're cutting ties. No more calls, no more texts, no more pretending. This relationship died the day you buried the truth and expected us never to find it. Megan stood too. Her voice wavered, but only slightly. We're not the kids you used to manipulate. You can live with your choices, and we'll live with ours. We walked to the door. No one followed. No one stopped us. Outside, the sun was brighter than I expected. It touched the skin like a quiet promise. As the door shut behind us, I felt something shift inside, a long, silent release. 6 months later, autumn had returned to Austin. The leaves scattered gently along the sidewalks in crimson and gold. I sat at a familiar cafe near the university, the same one I always visited when I flew back to the States. Across from me, Megan was laughing. Her peach tea swirled in both hands as she recounted an awkward story about a customer who tipped her $20 just because she remembered his drink. I think he thought I had superpowers. She grinned. I laughed genuinely. No bitterness, no heaviness. Or maybe I said you're finally starting to rediscover yourself. Megan smiled softer now. Her eyes no longer carried the confusion they once held, the resentment, the pain. Just quiet peace. I didn't think I'd be okay this fast, she said. But maybe it's because I've stopped trying to prove anything to them. I nodded. 6 months ago, we closed that door, and we didn't look back. No one had called, no one had written, no one had apologized, but the silence gave us something we didn't know we needed: space, the kind that lets truth grow roots. I remembered those early weeks, Megan crashing in dorm rooms while I scoured the city for a safe apartment near campus. I signed the lease, covered the first 3 months. After that, Megan took the reins. Work, study, budgeting. She did it all on her own terms. You helped me restart, she said once. But the rest? I walk it alone. And she did, from skipping impulse buys to learning to cook. Megan rebuilt herself piece by piece. She wasn't waiting for permission anymore. Not from them. I think I'm lucky, she said one afternoon, staring at her tea. Even if it came late, I still got the truth. And I still have you. I looked at her eyes, soft. The breeze filtered in through the cafe window. And I still have you, I said. They took a lot from us, more than they'll ever admit, but unknowingly, they left behind something they couldn't destroy. What's that? Megan asked. I smiled. Us. We stayed another hour, talking, teasing, making plans for the weekend fair. The past never came up. It didn't need to. It wasn't erased, but it no longer held power. Later, I dropped her off at her apartment. She hugged me at the door, not the stiff kind born of duty, but the kind you give someone who stood beside you when the world tried to erase your story. I got in the car, turned the radio on, and let the quiet music rise. Inside, I felt something clear. I didn't miss what we'd lost: money, reputation, even trust. Because the most valuable thing was that in a world that tried to make us enemies, we chose each other. Alice and Megan's story is a reminder that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. But even in the ruins of a broken past, there's still room to rebuild. Not all ties deserve repair, but some, the ones rooted in honesty, are worth everything. What would you have done in Alice's place? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more true stories of family truth and redemption.